K-drama cycle. No one saw it coming. Not the fans, not the industry insiders, not even the most dedicated Netflix watchers who thought they had already seen every possible twist. And yet, in early 2026, one announcement was enough to freeze timelines, flood comment sections, and send shockwaves through the entire Asian entertainment scene. Becky Armstrong was named the new Nanno. For a role so deeply tied to one face, one presence, and one unforgettable era, the news felt unreal. Nanno was never just a character. She was an icon, a symbol of chaos, justice, and moral discomfort wrapped in a deceptively innocent smile. For years, audiences believed Nanno could never be replaced, only remembered. And yet, here was Becky. At first, disbelief ruled. Fans reread headlines, refreshed official pages, and waited for clarification. Some assumed it was a rumor. Others believed it was a temporary reset, a spin-off, or a marketing stunt. But as more confirmations surfaced, the truth became impossible to deny. Netflix wasn't revisiting Nanno's world quietly. They were reinventing it. Almost immediately, reaction split into two powerful currents. One side was curiosity, sharp, intense, and hungry for answers. Becky Armstrong had already proven her range, her discipline, and her ability to command attention without forcing it. Supporters argued that if anyone could approach a role this dangerous, this iconic, it would be someone willing to respect the legacy while daring to reshape it. The other side was grief. For many Freen Sarocha fans, this announcement felt personal. Nanno was sacred. The idea of another actress stepping into that psychological territory triggered emotions that went far beyond casting. It wasn't jealousy, it was fear. Fear that something once untouchable would be diluted. Fear that history would be rewritten too fast. And yet, beneath the noise, something deeper was unfolding. Industry analysts began to notice how carefully the project was being positioned. Netflix didn't announce Becky as the new Nanno casually. The language was deliberate. Words like reset, reimagining, and new cycle appeared again and again. This wasn't about copying the past. It was about confronting the present. Becky's version of Nanno, insiders hinted, would not mirror the original. She wouldn't rely on the same expressions, the same silence, or the same unsettling innocence. Instead, this Nanno would reflect a darker, more complex era, one shaped by social media, public judgment, and performative morality. That alone changed the conversation. Fans began to wonder, what if this wasn't replacement, but evolution? Still, the fandom reaction remained intense. Freen Sarocha's name trended alongside Becky's, even though Freen herself had not commented. Every old clip resurfaced. Every iconic scene was reanalyzed. Comparisons flooded timelines before a single frame of the new project was released. Becky, for her part, remained quiet. No dramatic statements. No defensive interviews. Just one carefully chosen message thanking fans for their support and asking viewers to wait for the story. That restraint only fueled speculation further. Some interpreted it as confidence, others as pressure quietly carried. Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. The script, reportedly locked months before the announcement, was said to explore themes that the original series could never fully touch: accountability culture, digital cruelty, and the illusion of righteousness. In that context, Becky's casting began to make sense to some. She wasn't being asked to imitate Nanno. She was being asked to confront the audience. As weeks passed, emotions softened, but anticipation rose. Even skeptical fans admitted one thing: this move was bold, dangerous, risky, and in an industry increasingly afraid of backlash, risk was rare. Whether loved or hated, this version of Nanno was already doing what the character always did best: forcing people to feel uncomfortable. By the time teaser rumors began circulating, one truth had become unavoidable. The shockwave had already hit. The debate had already reshaped fandom spaces. And Becky Armstrong had already stepped into one of the most unforgiving roles of her generation. The role no one expected. And perhaps, the role that would redefine 2026, whether the world was ready or not. K-drama cycle. As the shock settled into something heavier and more reflective, the conversation around Becky Armstrong began to change. The outrage cooled, Not because everyone agreed, but because curiosity started winning over anger. People wanted to understand what Netflix was truly planning and what Becky had been trusted to carry. Behind closed doors, sources hinted that this new chapter of the series would not open with chaos, but with silence. A different kind of silence than audiences remembered. Where the original Nanno watched the world with playful cruelty, this version would observe with restraint, almost empathy, until that empathy shattered. It was a risk that demanded an actress who could hold tension without spectacle. That's where Becky came in. Those who had worked with her described her as meticulous, almost unsettling in preparation. She studied not just the character, but the audience reaction to the original series. She watched how viewers justified Nanno's actions, how they rooted for punishment when it felt deserved. The goal, insiders said, wasn't to shock for shock's sake, but to make the audience question why they wanted to be shocked at all. This reframing began to reach fans. Slowly, discussion threads shifted from "should this exist" to "what will this say?" Some Freen Sarocha supporters admitted their anger wasn't about Becky. It was about fear of losing something irreplaceable. Others argued that Nanno had always represented change, and resisting that change missed the point of the character entirely. Still, the pressure on Becky was immense. Every appearance she made, award shows, interviews unrelated to the project, even casual photos, was scrutinized. Her expressions were analyzed. Her tone was compared. Silence, once neutral, became a statement. Yet she continued to avoid direct commentary, allowing the work to speak before she ever did. Then came the first controlled leak. Not a trailer, not a clip, just a single still image released without warning. Becky, standing alone. No smile, no blood, no chaos, just a steady gaze into the camera that felt less like judgment and more like accusation. The internet froze. Reactions flipped overnight. Some called it unsettling in a new way. Others admitted, quietly, that it felt right. The image didn't erase the past, it challenged the viewer to let go of their comfort with it. This wasn't the Nanno who punished monsters. This was the Nanno who asked who the monsters really were. At the same time, Freen Sarocha's name remained part of the conversation, not as competition, but as origin. Many fans began framing the narrative differently. Freen didn't lose Nanno. She completed her. Becky wasn't erasing history. She was inheriting responsibility. That shift mattered. Because by now, it was clear that Netflix hadn't miscalculated the backlash. They expected it. They counted on it. Nanno was never meant to be safe, and neither was the reaction to her return. The discomfort wasn't a side effect. It was the point. As 2026 unfolded, anticipation turned heavy and electric. People who swore they would never watch began admitting they would at least try one episode. Fans who once demanded cancellation now waited for the trailer just to be sure of what they were rejecting. And Becky Armstrong stood at the center of it all, quiet, composed, and unflinching. The role no one expected had become the role no one could ignore. Because when Nanno returns, she doesn't ask for permission. She asks the question. And this time, the question isn't whether Becky is worthy of the role, but whether the audience is ready for the answer. K-drama cycle. As production quietly moved forward, a new layer of tension surfaced, one that had nothing to do with casting and everything to do with timing. The world Becky's Nanno was entering in 2026 looked nothing like the one the original series exposed. Online judgment was faster. Cancel culture was louder. Moral outrage had become entertainment. And suddenly, the idea of Nanno returning felt less like fiction and more like a mirror. Insiders revealed that the writers deliberately built the new story around this reality. Episodes were no longer structured around clear villains and satisfying punishment. Instead, they focused on gray zones, moments where the audience would instinctively choose a side, only to realize later they had judged too quickly. Becky's Nanno wasn't there to punish individuals alone. She was there to expose systems, crowds, and the comfort people find in cruelty when it's justified by righteousness. This shift unsettled even longtime fans. Early script whispers suggested that some episodes would end without resolution. No justice, no revenge, just consequences left hanging. For viewers raised on moral certainty, this was more frightening than any violent twist. It meant sitting with discomfort, something Nanno had always demanded, but never to this extent. Meanwhile, Becky began preparing in isolation. Unlike typical promotional cycles, she reportedly declined early talk show appearances related to the project. Instead, she worked with acting coaches and psychologists, studying how people react under public shame and online pressure. This wasn't about playing evil or innocence. It was about embodying inevitability. Nanno, after all, was never the cause. She was the catalyst. Fans noticed changes. Her demeanor grew more restrained. Her interviews became quieter, more deliberate. Some mistook it for pressure. Others saw transformation. The line between actress and role blurred in the public eye, adding to the unease surrounding the project. Then came the first teaser. Just 7 seconds. No dialogue. No music. A classroom. Phones lighting up one by one. Becky standing at the front, unseen by the characters, but unmistakably present to the audience. At the end, a single line appeared. "You chose this." The internet erupted. Praise and fear collided. Some called it genius. Others accused the show of targeting its own viewers. Think pieces followed within hours, debating whether entertainment should ever hold a mirror this sharp. And just like that, Becky's Nanno accomplished what the original always did. It forced people to talk, argue, and reflect. Interestingly, Freen Sarocha's fans responded differently this time. Instead of outrage, many expressed quiet pride. They recognized the DNA of the character, the same discomfort, the same moral tension, but evolving in a way that honored what came before. The narrative shifted again, not toward rivalry, but lineage. This wasn't replacement. It was succession. As the release date drew closer, one thing became undeniable: this version of Nanno would not be universally loved. But perhaps that was the highest compliment. Nanno was never meant to comfort. She was meant to reveal. And Becky Armstrong had stepped fully into that truth. By the time the full trailer loomed on the horizon, audiences weren't asking if they would watch. They were asking what part of themselves they might recognize when they did. Because in 2026, Nanno isn't just watching students anymore. She's watching all of us.